There are places that seem to have fallen into eternal slumber, yet beneath the surface, something still stirs in silence. Greenhollow Cemetery was one such place. Tucked away in the cold outskirts, it had been forgotten by time. The ground was cloaked in moss, the tombstones tilted and worn, and the wind always blew through as if carrying whispers from a distant past. One early autumn morning, when fog still blanketed the earth, Harold, an old, solitary gravedigger living beside the cemetery, noticed something unusual. On one of the oldest stone graves, nameless and unmarked, just a cracked slab of rock. A wisp of white smoke was rising. It wasn't incense. It wasn't mist. It was a kind of smoke. Thin as a breath, yet so cold it prickled the skin. It drifted upward from the crack in the stone, gentle as a soul trying to rise from the earth. Harold stood staring at the smoke, trembling. He'd seen many strange things in the cemetery over the years, but never anything like this. It was exactly 3 a.m., the hour of spirits, as his grandfather once told him. Just 3 days later, the strangeness returned. This time, it wasn't just white smoke. A piercing scream shattered the night, waking the nearby residents. A young girl named Ellie had come to the cemetery with friends under a dim moon. They carried a small oil lamp, planning to capture eerie photos for a prank in town. The nameless, moss-covered, cracked tombstone naturally became the perfect backdrop for their bold game. Ellie stepped closer, raising the lamp to illuminate the mossy stone. The flame inside flickered in the wind, casting a faint golden glow across the cold surface. At that moment, the white smoke began to rise from the crack. At first, it was faint like mist, then it thickened rapidly, swirling like a spirit freshly awakened. The air turned icy. The flame in the lamp flared once and died, plunging them into thick darkness. A sharp, chilling scream tore through the night. When her friend rushed over, Ellie had collapsed on the ground, unconscious. Her left hand was bruised, marked with imprints, as if an invisible hand had gripped her tightly, pulling her down from below. Word reached the police. They came, conducted a brief investigation, and dismissed it as a natural phenomenon. But the townsfolk didn't buy it. An old woman living near the cemetery whispered to Harold, "I've heard. That's where Eleanor Marlowe is buried. A woman tied up and buried alive, accused of witchcraft. No one dared name her grave. Now she's back, looking for someone to hear her voice." Rumors spread like wildfire. Then a peculiar letter arrived for me and Dorian Vale. Inside was a photo of the faint white smoke, accompanied by a handwritten note. The white smoke rises again, and there are whispers in the wind. We set out that very afternoon. I, Lucien Crowe, couldn't explain why my heart raced faster than usual as the carriage rolled slowly into Greenhollow. Perhaps it was the wind, perhaps the damp, cold smell of the cemetery soil, or something waiting. Dorian, as always, remained calm. His face was impassive, his eyes fixed ahead. But I knew, if something could pull him away from his chessboard and logical murder cases, it was no ordinary matter. We entered the cemetery as dusk fell, and the white smoke rose once more from that nameless grave. It twisted and curled like a hand beckoning us. I stood still. Dorian only murmured, "This is no joke." The white smoke dissipated into the air, leaving behind the scent of cold earth and damp moss soaked in night dew. Dorian stood motionless before the nameless grave. I could hear the dry leaves crunching under his feet, but his eyes were fixed on something I couldn't see. "What do you see?" I asked. Dorian crouched down. He brushed his hand lightly over the cracked stone where the smoke had risen. Scraping away a layer of moss, he revealed a faint, nearly erased inscription. "Eleanor Marlowe, the gatekeeper." A shiver ran through me. That name. I'd heard it in the old woman's tale near the cemetery, an ancient name shrouded in darkness and rumors. Eleanor Marlowe, a woman said to have been buried alive, and now she might be trying to speak. We returned to Harold, the gravedigger, for more answers. He sat by the fireplace, hands still trembling, his cloudy eyes holding a past he dared not recall. "I've been here 40 years, he said, and no one's ever dared approach that grave. Folks call it the silent tomb, because no one knows who's inside, not until the white smoke appeared." I mentioned the inscription bearing Eleanor's name. Harold flinched. "Eleanor Marlowe. No, it can't be." "Why not?" I pressed. He hesitated, then spoke. "I heard my father say Eleanor was the wife of a wealthy merchant. She was known for her beauty, but they said she was cursed. Some nights, people saw her walking the fields, talking to no one. When her husband died, they blamed her. Then one night, she vanished. The next day, the grave was there. No one saw a body, no one saw a funeral. They say she was buried alive." A coldness crept into me, not from the wind or fog, but from something vague and murky, like a dark memory suppressed for centuries. That night, Dorian and I returned to the grave. Under the flickering oil lamp, I noticed fresh scratches around the tomb's edge, as if something inside had tried to claw its way out. I placed my hand on the stone. Cold, so cold. Then a breeze passed, and I heard it. A sound so faint I might have thought I imagined it if I hadn't been so close. Whispers. A woman's voice. Soft, choked, almost a sob. "I'm still here." I whipped around, the lantern's light piercing the darkness, but there was nothing. Only rows of silent graves standing tall in the fog. I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. When I turned to Dorian, he stood there, gazing upward. "Did you hear it?" I asked. "Yes," he replied coolly. And it wasn't the wind. It was a cry for help. The next day, we visited the old church on the cemetery's edge. A weathered stone building, moss clinging to its walls. The priest there was elderly, hunched, his eyes following us as if he knew something but refused to speak. "You're digging into a secret meant to stay buried," he said, then turned and walked away. I sighed. Dorian said nothing, but then he noticed something. A section of the church floor bore scratches, as if it had been pried open repeatedly. He lifted a loose plank. Beneath it was a small, dark, deep cellar. We lit a lamp and descended. The air was damp, thick with the smell of old paper and cold earth. In the corner sat a worm-eaten wooden chest, containing a few aged personal items, and a worn leather journal, the writer's initials faintly carved on the cover, T.M., Thomas Marlowe, Eleanor's husband. I don't know why my hands trembled as I opened the journal's first pages. Perhaps it was the smell, the scent of old leather, of time, and a faint whiff of decay, as if each page had absorbed the pain and blood of its writer. Dorian stood behind me, silent, but I knew he was memorizing every detail, as always. The journal began with short, seemingly mundane entries. Trade schedules, dinner parties, notes on commodity prices. Thomas Marlowe, Eleanor's husband, was a wealthy merchant, a fact the whole town knew. But then the pages changed. The handwriting grew erratic. Sentences rushed together, sometimes without punctuation. It was as if the writer was unloading something in a panic. "Eleanor, she's no longer herself. Last night she stood in the room, staring into the darkness, speaking a strange language. She said, 'The gate is open. I hear them calling my name.'" I glanced at Dorian. He nodded slightly, confirmation that this was no ordinary journal. It was a confession. The next lines made the air in the cellar feel colder. "They said I'd pay a price to keep what I have. Wealth, power, everything. It didn't come from luck. They told me to choose someone closest to me. and I chose her. My heart clenched. Dorian stayed silent for a long moment, then spoke, his voice low and heavy. Thomas sacrificed Eleanor. I gripped the journal tighter. The story was no longer mere rumor. It lay bare, dark, and raw. Eleanor's husband, in a pact for wealth, had offered up his wife, the woman he once loved, as a sacrifice. An ancient ritual, a blood curse. Thomas didn't detail the ritual, but he left a Latin passage, which Dorian later translated, "The sacrificed must be alive, must know they're betrayed, and must be buried under a full moon, their soul forever unliberated, guarding the boundary between worlds." Eleanor had known, and she was still there, beneath the cold stone, whispering through the white smoke, waiting for someone to uncover the truth. The final page bore a single scrawled line, written by a trembling hand. "If the white smoke rises, the gate begins to crack." I closed the journal, my body icy. As we left the crypt, night had fallen. The wind grew stronger. The cemetery in the distance sank back into shadow. I glanced at the stone grave. For a moment, I thought I saw a white figure, flickering through the mist. Unclear, uncertain. One thing was sure, Eleanor was no longer silent. Since that night, I could no longer sleep deeply. Every time I closed my eyes, the journal's words, "If the white smoke rises, the gate begins to crack," etched themselves into my lids. I dreamed of a black stone door, tall and cold. Its surface bore hundreds of deep handprints, as if people had pounded and begged for release. Behind it, a woman's voice wept, not aloud, but in faint, trembling echoes. I jolted awake in the dead of night, heart pounding, sweat chilling my back. I heard something outside the window, not the wind, but a call. "Lucien." I lit the oil lamp. Beyond the glass was thick fog, no sign of anyone. Yet the feeling that someone had just been near lingered vividly. The next morning I told Dorian. He didn't dismiss it or seem surprised. He only said, "I checked last night's heliograph plate, the special film kind, sensitive to moonlight. At exactly 3:07 a.m., the lens fogged for a moment, as if someone stood before it, but no figure appeared." I held my breath. And in the low-frequency audio log, from the mechanical box I rigged to the wind catcher, there's a faint sound. You have to press your ear to the tube to hear it. A woman's voice whispering, "I'm still here. I'm still waiting." That night, we returned to the cemetery, bringing Dorian's mechanical audio box, a handcrafted device with rollers and a diaphragm to capture low-frequency sounds beyond normal hearing. The full moon hung behind clouds. The wind fell still, as if holding its breath. Before the nameless stone grave, the air grew so thick it weighed on our lungs. Dorian set the box down and activated it. A soft hum buzzed to life, and then I saw it. A white figure, faint as mist, stood a few steps away. Her face was indistinct, long hair draped down, a tattered white dress stained with mud. I didn't dare move. Dorian stood frozen too, his hand steadying the roller to keep it on track. The figure raised a hand, not in anger or horror, but as a final plea. Then she dissolved into the mist. We said nothing on the way back, but in Dorian's eyes I saw he believed. No admission was needed. Eleanor's presence, even for mere seconds, had done what no logical evidence or indictment could. It silenced a man like Dorian Vale. That night, Dorian didn't sleep. I woke at 3 a.m. to find his oil lamp still burning. He sat amid a table strewn with documents, copies of the journal, old maps, notes, and a dusty Latin book borrowed from the local library. "The gate Thomas Marlowe mentioned," Dorian said, eyes fixed on the page, "isn't symbolic. It's a real ritual, known in ancient occultism as the Pact of the Shadow Gate." He pointed to a Latin passage, then translated, To sustain prosperity, the pact-maker must sacrifice their closest kin, alive and aware. The victim is sealed in the earth, becoming the gatekeeper, barring wandering spirits from crossing the world's boundary. My heart sank. Eleanor, betrayed by the husband she trusted most, and that ritual, even now, still held power. Dorian uncovered another clue. In a brief note, Thomas mentioned hiding the true body where light never reaches. That meant the current grave, where the smoke rose, wasn't Eleanor's real resting place. It was a decoy built to mislead, or to seal the ritual's energy. Her true body, where she'd been buried alive, was hidden somewhere no one could find. If we find her real remains and perform the proper rite, Dorian said, Eleanor could be freed, and the curse would end. But Thomas left no map, only a cryptic Latin poem scattered across the journal's final pages. Dorian copied it all and read aloud. Where light never shines amid broken-winged angels, lies the fallen one unheard in her pleas. I immediately thought of the broken angel statue near the cemetery's end, where I'd felt an odd chill on my first visit. I think that's the place, I said. Dorian nodded. Possibly, if so, Eleanor was hidden in plain sight, yet no one listened to her cries. Before leaving the inn, I reviewed the audio log again. Eleanor's voice wasn't weeping this time. It whispered faintly, almost a plea. Don't let me be forgotten. That afternoon, we returned to the cemetery. The sky was overcast, heavy with dark clouds. The broken-winged angel stood alone in a secluded corner, moss coating its form, one wing shattered like a silent wound. Dorian grabbed a shovel. I helped clear the earth before the statue. First grass, then soft soil, then gravel, and then, clank, the shovel hit something solid. We dug deeper. A small stone slab lay buried. No name, no inscription, but beneath it, a crude layer of sealed bricks. "We've found it," Dorian whispered. A cold gust brushed my neck, not normal wind. It felt like a breath. We didn't excavate yet. Dorian wanted to prepare the unsealing ritual before touching Eleanor's remains. "We don't know what'll happen if we break the seal unprepared," he said, and I trusted him, because from that spot I began to hear footsteps from below. That afternoon, it started to rain. Not a downpour, but a drizzle, quiet and persistent, as if the sky mourned a soul forgotten for over a century. We returned to the broken-winged angel, where Eleanor Marlowe's true grave lay. Everything was ready: white candles, a willow wreath, and a ritual cloth, per the unsealing rite Dorian found in the ancient occult book. Dorian had wanted a real priest to assist, but all three we contacted refused. One vanished. One fell suddenly ill. The last, after stepping onto the grounds for less than 5 minutes, burst into tears and fled without a word. "We'll do it ourselves," Dorian said, his voice calm as the dusk. "And Lucien, this part is yours." I froze. "Mine? You're the one Eleanor chose. You heard her. Every encounter she called your name. That means her spirit trusts you, not me." I stared at the damp earth, where we'd soon touch a pain sealed for centuries. A strange feeling welled up. Not fear nor pity exactly, but duty. Eleanor had been betrayed, buried alive, and now I, a stranger, unconnected by blood, was the last one who could hear and answer her plea. The ritual began at 3 a.m., the hour the white smoke first appeared. Wind howled through the graves like whispering shadows. The full moon hid behind clouds, but its light faintly outlined my trembling hands. I knelt before the grave. Beside me, Dorian lit the white candles, arranging them in a circle. In my hands was the prayer, an ancient requiem, translated into English, half ceremony, half supplication. I closed my eyes, took a deep breath, and began to read. From the first words, the air shifted, the wind died, All sound vanished. No rustling leaves, no insects, nothing. I felt a presence. After the seventh line, the air thickened, as if someone stood close. A strange scent rose, dried white flowers mixed with damp earth and old blood. I kept my eyes shut, kept reading. At the 13th line, a faint crack sounded from below. The ground trembled, and then a voice whispered by my ear. Software, cold but clear. "It's me." I opened my eyes. Eleanor stood there, not like in my dreams, not faint as mist. A white figure, fully formed, long hair cascading, a tattered Victorian dress caked in mud. Her face held no anger, but her eyes, deep, hollow, and so desperate I had to look away. She said nothing more. She only raised a hand toward the earth, her true burial place, then gazed at me, pleading, as if I were her last glimmer of hope. I nodded and read to the final line. "May the bound soul shed its chains and return to the light. If injustice was the gate, forgiveness is the key." A fierce wind swept through, the candles snuffed out. The trees shuddered, and Eleanor dissolved in a pale glow. No smoke, no sound, just a sudden absence that left my heart empty. Dorian stepped forward, resting a hand on my shoulder. "We've done part of it, but one thing remains. We must bring her to her proper rest." The next morning, the sky remained gray. The air hung thick, silent and heavy, as if the earth itself held its breath before the truth emerged. We returned to the broken-winged angel. The patch Dorian had dug was now carefully marked. No more rituals, no more apparitions, just one final task, returning Eleanor to where she belonged. Dorian pried open the sealed bricks. Beneath lay a pit filled with stones and clay, a clear sign of a hidden grave. We dug layer by layer. No one spoke, only the sound of shovels, falling earth, and my tightening heartbeat. Then, as the lantern's light hit something torn and decayed, I knew we'd arrived. A small skeleton wrapped in rotted fabric clung with dirt and moss. Around its neck glimmered a thin silver necklace, engraved E.M. My throat tightened. My hand shook as I brushed the cloth over the chest. Dorian knelt, inspecting closely. He whispered, "The fingernails. Broken." She tried to claw her way out. Eleanor was buried, alive. I closed my eyes. Her voice from last night echoed in my mind. "Don't let me be buried again." We prepared a proper burial for Eleanor, the first in over a century. A quiet ceremony, no kin, no family, just me, Dorian, and the peace the air began to carry. We placed her in a simple wooden coffin. Dorian laid the necklace on her chest. I added a bundle of white flowers, nameless blooms Harold said she once loved. Her new grave, this time bearing her name, Eleanor Marlowe, 1843-1871. Truth is the final light. No more white smoke, no whispers in the wind. Just the gentle silence of a soul finally heard. That evening we returned to the inn. Dorian, as usual, quietly brewed tea and pulled out the film reel from his antique camera, one he carried for special cases. He set it into a small hand-cranked projector. "I recorded the entire ritual," he said. "It might give us the final answer." I sat by the window. The rain had stopped. The wind outside no longer chilled, now carrying the scent of fresh grass and damp earth, a healing smell. Images flickered on the white sheet Dorian hung on the wall. Dim light danced through each frame. We saw ourselves, kneeling before Eleanor's grave amid the candle circle. And then, behind us, in the misty haze, a woman in a white dress appeared. Eleanor, she stood still, her face blurred but no longer desperate, no longer dark, instead, a faint smile. Then she turned and faded into the mist. I glanced at Dorian. He didn't smile, but his eyes softened. "This case is closed," he said. "Nothing's left here." I nodded, but as I turned away, the projector flashed one final frame, almost unnoticed. Yet I saw it clearly. Another pair of eyes. Not Eleanor's, not ours. Those eyes stared from the darkness, deeper beyond the graves, as if someone or something hadn't left. A week later, the rain ceased entirely. Greenhollow returned to its usual calm, quieter than before. No more white smoke, no whispers at 3 a.m. The mossy cemetery was now just an ancient, desolate plot, where the past slept beneath thick soil. Eleanor's new grave stood properly built, no longer hidden, no longer a dark mystery. Her full name, birth, and death were carved on the stone, and below a line I etched by hand, like a promise. Where truth rests, wronged souls are heard. I lingered by her grave the morning we left, laid a white flower, didn't know what to say, perhaps nothing needed saying. Eleanor had finally been heard, and she had been believed. On the train back to London, Dorian stayed silent the whole way. I understood. For him, the case was done. The facts aligned. The victim identified, the culprit, though long dead, exposed, and the supernatural, though Dorian would never admit it publicly, left too clear a mark to deny. I sat by the window watching light rain streak the foggy glass. An odd feeling lingered, relief mixed with unease. I recalled that final frame from the projector, those strange eyes behind Eleanor, a cold, deep gaze from a place light couldn't reach. I didn't mention it to Dorian, not from fear, but because I knew he'd seen it too, and like me, he chose silence. A week after returning, a strange parcel arrived at my door. No sender, no address. Inside was an old golden envelope, sealed with silver-gray wax. I opened it, a black and white photo of a different cemetery, not Greenhollow. Beneath, written in faded brown ink, "The next gate is opening. And this time, he won't stay silent." I sat still for a moment, then folded the photo, locked it in a drawer. We'd freed one soul, but perhaps unwittingly awakened another. Don't